Here are some things I believe about the Hunger Games that I have absolutely no evidence for, but I just accept. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes spoilers. Coriolanus and Sejanus have kissed. We've covered this. Do I ship them? No. Have they kissed? Yes. Let's move on. Who else has Sejanus kissed? Marcus, perhaps? I think so. That would make Sejanus's arc so much more heartbreaking, and Marcus's so much more heartbreaking. Oh my god. It would just be good storytelling. Third, the cat, Buttercup, is a mutt. I have no evidence to base this on other than the fact that that cat has lived through things that no human would ever survive. What purpose in the plot would Buttercup as a mutt serve? I don't know. Is it necessary? I don't think so. I just think that Buttercup is a mutt. Most of the characters have pretty tragic endings, but I choose to believe that Haymitch and Effie are happy and in love in a little cottage together, raising a little family of geese, and they're also immortal because they deserve that. Madge is also definitely in love with Katniss. I think Sejanus's ma definitely had a hand in getting the rebellion started within the capital. Snow also definitely had like a wall of pictures of Katniss that he like threw darts at in his free time. And then the moment he saw her singing to Rue in the arena, he was like, and then like printed out a picture of Lucy Gray and tagged it up alongside her. Let me know if you want more of these. You guys are missing the point. Nowhere did I say that Snow doesn't hate Sejanus. He hates that boy. All I said was that they've kissed. Like, Snow does see Sejanus as a nuisance who has wasted his time. He really hates him. He hates people from the districts. They have also kissed. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Like, this isn't my OTP. This isn't a ship that I support. I'm just saying that at some point in the past before the book, they have kissed. I don't think it changes anything about the story. I think it happened at some point in the past. Yeah. And before anybody is like, but why are you making everybody gay? First of all, there should be way more gay people in literature, and I am not going to change my stance on that. Second of all, it would add so much angst. So much angst. I was a Draco Harry fan fiction writer for my formative years. I'm here for angst, even if it isn't a ship that I support. The angst potential is off the charts. And frankly, I believe that Coriolanus has kissed far more people than he lets us know in the books. That man has some lips. They've done some kissing. He's an evil, evil man, but he's got some lips. Even Katniss talks about his lips quite a lot. Those lips have probably kissed some other lips. There are more things I believe about the Hunger Games that I have no evidence for, but I just think are true. Disregard this. I am very sick. I think Maude Ivory pioneered the high school theater program at the District 12 school, and as a result, Peeta was a theater kid. And yes, I think the Capitol would have supported high school theater productions that spread pro-Capitol propaganda. I also think Peeta would use family dinners as an opportunity to make announcements that would make his mother extremely upset, just to see what would happen, because that's just the kind of person he is. That man has announced his own pregnancy at his family dinner. I know he has. Snow has raging hemorrhoids. He's just someone who would have raging hemorrhoids. But, like, I think he's too ashamed to tell any of the Capitol officials about them, so he just, like, deals with them and scoots around. I think Effie represented who Prim was supposed to grow up to become if she had not lost all of her innocence. And I think Haymitch represents who Katniss would have grown up to become if Prim had been put into the games. I think Gale has 2014 Justin Bieber hair. Even though fashion was like a district thing, I also firmly believe that there were really big fashion trends in all of the districts that all of the teenagers would do. Like, I guarantee Katniss and Prim were unknowingly really big trendsetters in their school because their mom was so good at doing their hair. I think President Coin has a secret stash of Walmart box highlights in her bathroom, and she freaks out whenever her roots start to grow in because she thinks that the citizens of 13 are gonna realize that she's not like them. A lot of people view Katniss's mom leaving the wealthy part of the district for Katniss's dad as an act of love, something that is extremely romantic. And while love was her motivation for leaving, first and foremost, it was an act of rebellion. There's a reason why you can't marry up in the districts. The Capitol doesn't want the wealthy and poor parts of the district to have anything to do with each other, because anything that unifies the districts presents a threat to the Capitol. This is why they have Tesserae, to further divide the rich and the poor parts of the district and to build animosity between them. We see Gale has a lot of resentment towards Madge because she doesn't have to take out Tesserae, so she's not in danger of going into the games. Gale has to put his name in almost 50 times just to feed his family. I can guarantee Katniss's mom marrying down wasn't something the Capitol was gonna look away from, especially if there's any chance that Katniss's dad may have had ties to the Covey or the Rebellion. Marrying who you want isn't illegal. Katniss says it's one of the very few freedoms they actually have, but whether or not something is legal means absolutely nothing to the Capitol if it means it could put their regime at risk in any way. And for that reason, I believe, I don't expect everybody else to subscribe to this theory, but I believe that the explosion in the mines that unalived Katniss's dad was because of their decision to unify the rich and poor parts of the district. And some people may say that's a reach, but if Katniss's mom married down, which very rarely happens, that would put a target on her back, for sure. And if the Capitol was concerned with legalities, they would very easily be able to arrange an accident, which they've done several times before. Some people who believe that the Hunger Games drawings are rigged think that Prim's name was put in as an effort to target Katniss's mom. I don't believe that. I do believe they were rigged, but I believe it was for a different reason. I don't necessarily think Prim specifically was being targeted, but I do think they were rigged. That's a whole separate video. A lot of people view Katniss's mom leaving the wealthy part of the district for Katniss's dad as an act of love, something that is extremely romantic. And while love was her motivation for leaving, first and foremost, it was an act of rebellion. There's a reason why you can't marry up in the districts. The Capitol doesn't want the wealthy and poor parts of the district to have anything to do with each other, because anything that unifies the districts presents a threat to the Capitol. This is why they have Tesserae, to further divide the rich and the poor parts of the district and to build animosity between them. We see Gale has a lot of resentment towards Madge because she doesn't have to take out Tesserae, so she's not in danger of going into the games. Gale has to put his name in almost 50 times just to feed his family. I can guarantee Katniss's mom marrying down wasn't something the Capitol was gonna look away from, especially if there's any chance that Katniss's dad may have had ties to the Covey or the Rebellion. Marrying who you want isn't illegal. Katniss says it's one of the very few freedoms they actually have, but whether or not something is legal means absolutely nothing to the Capitol if it means it could put their regime at risk in any way. And for that reason, I believe, I don't expect everybody else to subscribe to this theory, but I believe that the explosion in the mines that unalived Katniss's dad was because of their decision to unify the rich and poor parts of the district. And some people may say that's a reach, but if Katniss's mom married down, which very rarely happens, that would put a target on her back, for sure. And if the Capitol was concerned with legalities, they would very easily be able to arrange an accident, which they've done several times before. Some people who believe that the Hunger Games drawings are rigged think that Prim's name was put in as an effort to target Katniss's mom. I don't believe that. I do believe they were rigged, but I believe it was for a different reason. I don't necessarily think Prim specifically was being targeted, but I do think they were rigged. That's a whole separate video. I don't have patience for this today. You guys don't get to tell me that I don't have critical thinking skills if I don't agree with your Hunger Games theories. That is insane. And I'm getting defensive about this because this is my special interest and I've had a bad day. Here's some rapid fire A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes thoughts I have, with spoilers. I don't think they mention this in the book, but in the movie they mention that Coriolanus' father was killed in the forests on the outskirts of District 12. And I think it is extremely poetic that that is the very same place that Coriolanus crossed that line into being just like his father, because it was kind of like his father passed and was born there. I love the symbology behind Coriolanus disposing of any sentimental item except for his father's compass, because even though his mental break hadn't fully happened at that point, like up until that point, he had been holding on to pieces of his mom that he wanted to remember her by, something that reminded him of who he was before the games. The first time he gives it up, it's a sacrifice, and it ends up making its way back to him. The second time he gives it up, he chooses to dispose of it. And the moment Coriolanus decides to throw that away, all he's left with is his father's compass, as well as his father's moral compass. I like how many times it's mentioned throughout the book that rain brings out the snakes, as well as how many times the sound of snow falling is mentioned, because Snow is a form of precipitation that would also bring out the snakes. I also really like that Lucy Gray isn't a fear-motivated person, while Coriolanus clearly is, and it's very much shown in how they respond to snakes. When presented with an enormous vat of very poisonous, dangerous snakes that kill everybody, Lucy Gray sings to them like the Pied Piper, and even though that's not the thing that keeps them away from her, she's chillin', she's vibin'. Coriolanus got bit by a garter snake and assumed that Lucy Gray had used it as a weapon against him to unalive him. If the Capitol wanted to punish Katniss's mom by unaliving her husband in the mines, why would they wait until she already had 2 kids instead of just doing it as soon as she was married? Disclaimer: these are theories. This is a fictional series. I don't subscribe to all of these theories. I am just talking about them, and if you do not agree with them, you need to be nice or I'm gonna block you. Let's continue. Can you think of any reason why the Capitol would wait for someone they want to punish to have children before unaliving their spouse? And I'm not saying that Prim and Katniss were specifically targeted by the Capitol in the Hunger Games reapings. I am saying that a really excellent way to punish Katniss's mom after she left the wealthy part of the district, after she's already lost her best friend to the games, and after she's lost her husband in a mining accident, would be for her children to be put into the drawing. And it would be even worse if one of them actually had their name pulled. Another Hunger Games theory that I've thought about a lot is the theory that District 12 was never supposed to have a victor. Regardless of whether or not the reapings for the games were rigged, we know for a fact that the games themselves are rigged. We see Haymitch schmoozing up the sponsors, talking up the game makers, trying to get them to protect Katniss and Peeta in the arena when they could easily just unalive them, discussing who in the arena the audience should root for, who they should root against. And it was abundantly clear that Katniss and Peeta should not have survived, even if they were both victors. The only reason they did survive the arena was because Seneca Crane did not blow them up when they had the berries in their hands. But what if Haymitch was not supposed to win either? Like, he also won by using the Capitol's technology against them. He was only the second ever victor from District 12. And can you imagine the conversations that probably happened in District 12 after he won? Especially considering how many of them had been alive to see Lucy Gray's games? Like, Lucy Gray was probably brought up in conversation for the first time in years and years the day Haymitch won his games, which is definitely not something that President Snow would want to have happen. It would make sense why the Capitol did what they did with Haymitch's image after the games, because they would not want people paying attention to District 12. Like, Snow isn't the only person who remembers Lucy Gray. A lot of people were alive to see her win. Snow definitely wasn't the only person who recognized the lullaby that Katniss sang to Rue in the forest. He definitely was not the only person to recognize the hanging tree. Like, Lucy Gray didn't just start coming back to haunt Snow the moment he saw Katniss sing to Rue in the arena. She's been haunting him this entire time. But anyways, it's just a theory. A games theory. Let me know what you think. Do you think the District 12 was supposed to ever have a victor, or do you think that it was arranged? Here are more things I believe to be true about the Hunger Games that I have no evidence for, I just accept. Caesar Flickerman is an anamorph, and I will show you my proof. Here is my proof. I made this. It's just an example of showing how Caesar Flickerman has evolved from Frankie Grande, and Frankie Grande evolved from Ethan Slater. And this is all of the evidence you should need. I also think that Snow's granddaughter had like a fan account for Everlark during the 74th games, and she would post thirst edits of Peeta in the cave. And I just imagine Snow walking into her bedroom and she's taping a poster of Peeta to her wall, and he just like sighs and turns around and walks out, and then immediately makes an announcement that any sign of the Mockingjay is a rebellion. I think if Peeta's fashion choices had been left up to him to decide, he would have worn a long, skinny scarf everywhere, and possibly like a Newsies hat, and maybe even fingerless gloves. And he would also very loudly complain about how the art department doesn't get nearly enough funding. And Peeta is just such a performer. I feel like after the whole revolution died down, he became like a Bob Ross type person and just had like a little painting TV show where he made silly jokes the whole time.
because I feel like he would get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes spoilers. Here are the things I think they removed from the longer version of the movie they initially showed fans before it released. If you were part of the fan viewing, feel free to correct me, because I wasn't there. I think they cut out all of Clemmy's storyline. I think they probably filmed it and were going to have it in the movie, and then took it out. I think Beanpole was supposed to be in the movie initially. I know that he was cast, so I'm sure they probably filmed some shots with him, and then he wasn't in it. I think they probably had more of Sejanus's ma in the movie initially before taking her out, as well as some more Tigress. I think they were probably going to show us a little bit more of what was happening back in the Capitol while Snow was in District 12, and then didn't end up showing it just to save time. I think they probably cut out a lot of Sejanus and Coriolanus's friendship and, like, them actually spending time together. Like, we only really know that Coriolanus and Sejanus are friends in the movie because everybody says that they're friends. But, like, in the book, they, even though Coriolanus hates him, spend a lot of time together and are friends. Coriolanus' friendship with him is not authentic at all, but they are still friends. I think we were supposed to get a hell of a lot more Maud Ivory in the movie. I'm guessing Reaper and Wovey probably had a bit more screen time in the longer showing, especially considering how fleshed out Lamina was. I think they probably fleshed out more of the tributes in the arena and then decided to focus more on Lamina. What do you think was originally in the longer version of the movie that they decided to cut out? If you were actually there, let me know how correct these were, because I really want to know what happened. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes spoilers. I have a theory about Clemmy. I have a theory that after she came out of Dr. Gall's lab, covered in scales, with snake-like tendencies, she was used as one of the first trendsetters in the Capitol for the really eccentric, colorful body modifications they all have in the 74th games. Because to everybody else's knowledge, she just had the flu. And there's no flu that would cause somebody to emerge from the hospital with snake scales. But not only that, the Capitol people are under the impression that their children are the exception to the Hunger Games, that their children are the only ones who are actually safe from the Capitol. And if they found out that Clemmy was a victim of the Capitol, I can't imagine that they would respond too positively to that. But not only that, Dr. Gall holds a grudge. The reason Dr. Gall punished Clemmy in the first place was because Clemmy took credit for something that she didn't do. So I don't think her punishment was the snake bite. I think the real punishment would be that she had to take credit for what was done to her. And then she had to watch something that traumatized her become a fashion trend. I've seen some mixed reviews for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie on YouTube, and I think that everybody is absolutely entitled to their opinion. There were things I didn't like about the movie, and there were things that I loved about the movie, but I just watched a review of the movie, and their biggest complaint was that they gave District 12 an accent that made them sound stupid, and that it doesn't make sense for the people of District 12 to have an accent if Katniss didn't have an accent in the original series. And I've been thinking about it all day because it rubbed me the wrong way so bad, because I totally understand a critique being that, like, they didn't feel like the actors were very skilled in the accent they were doing. Like, there's valid critiques you can make, and then there is insinuating that somebody lacks intelligence because of their accent, or making fun of little sayings that Lucy Gray has, like the cake with the cream. And I think it just really, really rubbed me the wrong way, because that is exactly something that Snow would think and say. Like, how can you insinuate that somebody lacks intelligence because of their regional accent and not see the very real problems with that line of thinking, even if this is a fictional series? Because Lucy Gray's accent is a real accent that lots of people have. Like, you can critique the plot and the performance and the pacing, but to insult somebody's accent is just, like, critique the writing and the pacing and the performance, the things that are open to critique. But there are a lot of people who feel represented by Lucy Gray, and to insinuate that her accent means she isn't intelligent is just many levels of problematic. It's extremely easy to hate Gale when he looks like this in the movies. Genuinely, the whole reason why he's my least favorite character in the movies is because this is who plays him. I think he is a fascinating and misunderstood character in the books. But he's also a teenager in the books, and he does not look like this. Imagine if this was who played Gale. Can you imagine how much more devastating that would be to see unfold if you were watching, like, a kid you graduated from high school with become what Gale becomes? If this was the face of the rebellion, if this was the person who got kidnapped by the Capitol and tortured and put on national television to psychologically torture Katniss. There is a reason why actual children were not cast to play the main characters of the Hunger Games, and it's because it would be extremely disturbing. So I think they made a good call there, but you do lose a lot of Gale's character in how he was cast. Because in my opinion, the thing that makes Gale's story so tragic is that he was basically doomed from the start. He was so young, and he was used as a pawn in a system he didn't want to be a part of. All he wanted to do was survive, and that's what he did, but at what cost? Did trans people exist in Panem, at least in the capital? I mean, absolutely they existed all over Panem, because trans people have always existed, and that would not change in a dictatorship. And I think the social view of queer people was like, whatever. Like, Katniss saw Finnick giving Peeta CPR, and she just thought he was kissing him and was like, okay. There's a girl in the covey who's mentioned to have a girlfriend, and Snow was like, okay, it's just a passing thought. Now, there's nobody in the books that's explicitly stated to be trans, so I don't necessarily know what the culture around trans identities were in the capital and the districts, because it's not really talked about. I will say Tigress was played by a trans actress, and while it's not stated whether or not Tigress is trans, there's a lot of canon that is added in the movies. I'm a fan fiction person at heart, and so if I do not see representation in the media that I consume that I feel either represents me or my peers or my community, I will just headcanon that it is in there. But I will say that oppressive systems of government will do anything they can to divide people, and the Hunger Games are divided by gender. So while the climate for trans people in the capital may very well be a lot more accepting or at least tolerant, I think this would be a subject of some serious tension within the districts themselves, especially if a trans girl got her name drawn from the boys' bowl, or vice versa. Like, when these 12 districts have been raised with a very binary view of what gender looks like, and they also have to pit a boy and a girl against each other once a year, and historically, under systems of government like this, trans people have not been tolerated. I think the climates were probably very, very different in the capital versus the districts. The last thing I'm going to say in defense of my strong belief that Coriolanus and Sejanus have at some point kissed. Again, I don't ship them, I just think they've kissed. If this scene was considered an almost kiss, please provide an explanation for this one. Like, spot the difference. The difference is that Coriolanus and Sejanus actually look like they're about to kiss. I'm ready to tell you the omission I'm most upset about in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Spoilers ahead. A lot of people are upset about Clemmy's storyline being cut short, or that pretty much the whole Hunger Games themselves were different from the books. All of those things I could kind of understand. But there is an entire B-plot that was completely removed from the movies that really doesn't make sense. There is another doctor that works in the lab with the Mutts, Dr. K. Dr. K was the person who designed the Jabberjays. The project was her failure. Dr. K is who teaches Coriolanus what a mockingjay really is. The hybrid between a Jabberjay and a mockingbird. Coriolanus already hated the mockingjays. But then Dr. K explained that they were a capital creation that got out of control. And then he hated them tenfold. In fact, Coriolanus proposes a plan to, his commanding officer to go out and shoot all of the mockingjays and try and obliterate their existence, because they tried trapping them, and trapping them doesn't work, because mockingjays have evolved to have survival skills. No matter what Coriolanus does, he cannot get their population under control. Like, the thing that I loved the most about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is that we understand why Coriolanus hates mockingjays so much. Because he doesn't only hate them because they're a mark of a capital failure, they're an example of how quickly the system can unravel and become completely out of his control. Nothing he proposes or does anything about the population of mockingjays. And Lucy Gray told him that the show is not over until the mockingjay sings, and the moment they pulled out that the show was over. Like, I just feel like it doesn't really have the same oomph if you don't know the whole backstory of the beef that Coriolanus really has with mockingjays. Because it's not just that he does not like their existence. He has, like, personal beef with mockingjays. We do not see that in the movie. I have more Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie complaints. I promise I absolutely adored this movie. I'm just autistic and have to identify every single difference between the movies or the books, or I will explode. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes spoilers. But in the books, Jessup does not contract rabies on the train to the zoo. He contracts it from a raccoon in the zoo, after they've already gotten there. This is very important, because when the capital people realize that Jessup is rabid in the arena, it's very scary for them, because rabies is something that poses just as much of a threat to them as it does to the district citizens. It's a horror that when the capital citizens look at it, they cannot help but imagine themselves or their children in that same situation. And that is very dangerous for the games. Jessup being bitten by a bat on the train in transport to the arena really doesn't make sense, because it doesn't drive home how big of a deal it is. Like, literally the first scene in the entire movie is Coriolanus and Tigress running away from a rabid dog. But, like, we don't really get to understand the significance of that moment, because we don't see the development of Jessup not contracting rabies until he's in the capital. Also, one other nitpicky thing, just because this is who I am as a person, but the hydrophobia scene bothered me so much. Because rabies doesn't make you afraid of water. It makes you have throat spasms that make it impossible to swallow water, and it makes it look like you're afraid of it. It's such a nitpicky thing, but I just could not stop thinking about it. People thirsting over Young President Snow and becoming a Snow apologist is exactly what I thought was going to happen when this movie came out. It's the least surprising thing I've ever seen in my life. A decade ago, I lived on Tumblr, and there was a very large community of people who shipped themselves with the two people who went into Columbine High School. There is also the Ted Bundy fandom, which is just, why do those words exist within the same sentence? It is many levels of harmful and problematic. We should not be thinking that Snow's actions can be excused just because he is conventionally attractive when he's young. I think when you're younger, it's a lot more difficult to recognize why doing this in a fictional scenario can still be very harmful, but being an apologist for something that exists within a fictional realm romanticizes it and makes it okay for someone to do in real life. Like, we can absolutely thirst over Tom Blythe as President Snow, because that was a beautiful performance. That is a beautiful man. We should not be using Tom Blythe being a beautiful man as an excuse for the heinous things that Coriolanus, the fictional character, does. I'm going to be as nice as humanly possible when I say this. When we talk about not spending any money at big companies that support terrible things, I'm being very choosy with my words so it just doesn't get suppressed. Those conversations are not the time for you to say, but what if I need this, this, or this? What if I'm in this position and I have to buy from this company? Nobody is going to dog you for getting the things you need in order to survive. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Pretty much in America, no matter what you spend your money on, some person's labor was exploited. But those of us who have the ability to do so are deciding not to give certain companies our business because we have the ability to do so. To do so is a privilege. By not giving business to these big companies, I don't think any of us are assuming that by doing this, every company is going to change their business practices. The point is the message behind them. The point is that we don't want these companies to just think that we will turn a blind eye to what they're doing to many people. We want to send a message that we are not interested in associating or aligning ourselves with a business that supports genocide. No one is gonna cancel you if you have no pants, and for whatever reason the only pants available to you are on Shein, if that was somehow your circumstance. But if you see a post about a boycott and your first instinct is to say, but what about me? That centers the conversation around you and not about the countless people in the Congo and in Gaza and all over the world who are being killed.
There's a video, a real video, of a 16-year-old Palestinian girl having her leg amputated. She has no anesthesia. The doctor performing the amputation is her father, and the amputation taking place is being done on their dining room table. And this video in many ways is not a particularly unique video. We have seen countless images of people, children, even babies, undergoing extreme medical procedures in exceptionally unsanitary places without anesthesia in the last 102 days. I am not saying this to gross anyone out if you haven't seen the video, but I am saying this to remind people that this is still happening, that we are going back to our regular lives, that I'm seeing less and less Palestinian content. And it could be for a myriad of reasons, but I don't want one of those reasons to be that we just simply looked away because we have short attention spans. We've celebrated Christmas and New Year's. We've talked about everything from Ariana Grande to Halle Bailey's new baby. We've debated Martin Luther King's legacy for like the umpteenth year in a row. And the world still spins and multiple things happen at a time, but we can't forget Palestine, because right now, while many Palestinians are offline again, there is a little girl out there undergoing surgery with no anesthesia in conditions we just can't fathom. Many Palestinians have been offline and they're running out of eSIMs to continue to communicate with us. The bombings are still happening, and Bisan has recently told us that she has nowhere to go when this is all over. They're still dropping white phosphorus bombs, and the medical system has essentially collapsed. People are suffering. From the privileged position where most of us, even myself, sit, I understand the urge to look away for a minute, go, she really gaslit us for the whole year, that's crazy, and come back. But the important thing is you have to come back, because there's an entire population of people who for the last 102 days have had crisis after crisis that we cannot fathom, and we cannot give up on them because we have short attention spans. Lock back in. I got a community guidelines violation for my most recent video on Palestine, where I showed nothing graphic, said nothing disparaging. I said exactly what was happening to one family in Palestine, and then I said we just have to pay attention to what's happening even though the world still spins. That's all. And at almost 1 million views, the video got taken down. And I knew this was coming because anytime I have a video that does even remotely well on Palestine, they are quick to snatch it down. This was inevitable. But I want to talk about just how many hands have to go into contributing to a genocide, because it's not just like a one country or one person act. Every day on this app, we get countless Israeli propaganda videos, a day in my life living through war and how hard this is for them, even though you can see in the background there's nothing ever really going on. They're still eating fruits, they're taking their vitamins, they're going on their walks, blah, blah, blah. Every day we see countless videos of the abhorrent, disgusting stuff that soldiers will do to the homes of the people they have massacred. And all that's cool. All that can stay up. But the minute you talk about the group that's actually oppressed in any capacity, even if it's just to say, please don't look away from this, you're getting your video taken down. And that might seem really small, but this is how things go completely unnoticed for years. What's happening in Palestine right now is the worst that it's ever been, but it is not the only time it's ever been. And for many of us, what happened in October is the first time that we had our eyes opened even a little bit to what's been happening for 75 years in Palestine. The first time. And this is intentional, and everyone has a hand in it. From the governments around the world, to the education and school systems around the world, to the social media platforms that are supposed to keep us all connected. Everyone has to have a hand in it in order for it to be successful. And it's intentional, because if we were able to stay educated, if we were able to communicate efficiently, if we were able to organize and strategize without having to jump through 88 different hoops every single time, we could get a lot more done. We could affect a lot more change. And they know that, and they don't want it. They are co-signing this, and I want y'all to know it is not just one evil empire. It's not just Israel or the United States or a couple of countries. It is in every single one of our institutions, whether it is direct contributions, whether it is through food or funds or weaponry, or if it's just the fact that they knowingly and willingly continuously silence voices. Everybody's got a hand in it. As we are now well over 100 days into the Palestinian genocide, and as we are gearing up for the global strike taking place from January 21st through 28th, you might find yourself wondering why you keep seeing the watermelon emoji instead of the word Palestine, Palestinian, or instead of the Palestinian flag. And that's because the watermelon has been a symbol of Palestinian resistance for decades, because again, none of this started on October 7th. In fact, the watermelon became a popular symbol of Palestinian resistance 57 years ago after the Six-Day War in 1967, in which Israel took control of Gaza, the West Bank, and annexed East Jerusalem. Yeah, I said it, 57 years ago. It was at that time that they banned public displays of the Palestinian flag, making it a criminal offense into the 90s. In today's era of internet censorship, where you can get in more trouble for saying something against oppression than you can for actually contributing to oppression, people are hearkening back to what they did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. And when it is so important that we get information out, people don't have time to fool with the censorships and strikes that come with saying Palestine, Palestinian, or Gaza. Because again, genocide isn't a one-man, one-country job, and in fact, just about everybody has to be in on it, even our social media platforms. So long story short, to avoid censorship, much like they have had to do throughout history, the watermelon has made a resurgence as a symbol of Palestinian resistance. The global strike for Palestine is taking place this week from the 21st, which was yesterday, through the 28th, which is this upcoming Sunday. And I know you might be thinking, yeah, girl, yesterday was super easy. It was Sunday. I laid in bed. I did nothing. Easy breezy. What am I supposed to do for the next 7 days? I can't do it all. And I want to remind you of these two tidbits that have been keeping me by. First, doing all of the things is amazing and great, but honestly, doing some of the things is better than doing no things. As in, don't get burnt out or give up because you can't do every single thing. So here's a list of things that people are doing during the boycott. Here, pause to read. There's a lot on this list, and it includes things that might seem unfeasible, like taking your money out of the bank or not doing any banking, not going shopping, rescheduling appointments, not going to work in school. And for some people, it is really unfeasible. This is your reminder. Something is better than nothing. Do what you can, even if you can't do it every single day. For example, at some point this week, I'm going to have to go to the grocery store. The way that my funds are set up and the way that my life is set up, I don't go to the grocery store in one big bulk trip. I usually go every day or every other day. Because of the strike, I'm going to hold off for as long as I can, go grab what I need for a few days, and then call it. And I'm going to try to pay in cash. I also didn't get takeout or order food for lunch today. I just ate a bowl of cereal at home. Those intentional actions are so important, even if you can't do everything. But number two, in a lot of ways, it is more impactful for you to get a bunch of people to do one thing than for you to run yourself ragged trying to do everything. For example, I as an individual cannot do everything on that list, but I as an educator can use my position to get a group of people to do one thing. So today in class, one of our activities was to write an email to your representative about a social issue that you care about. I gave them the resources and the ability to learn more about what's happening in Palestine, and many of them chose to write about that. I probably got maybe 15 letters to representatives out there, and if they go and tell their friends, maybe even more. I'm not saying all of you are educators and can do that, but if you tell 2 or 3 friends who tell 2 or 3 friends, that is just as impactful as if you just stayed home all week. What I'm saying is do all that you can, but it's okay if you can't do it all. It was never about the hostages. It was never about the hostages. The last over 100 days of violence where they have insisted it is about getting them home safely is for naught. They do not care. If they wanted the hostages, they could have had them, they could have been had them, and they could have them now. They don't want them. And I know what you may be thinking. Maybe Hamas was asking for too much. Maybe the terms of negotiation were just too steep. They weren't. Hamas said they would release all Israeli hostages in exchange for withdrawing the troops from Gaza, releasing Palestinian hostages, because we all like to forget Israel had hundreds of Palestinian hostages, and to end the violence against Palestinians. The violence has been taking place for over 100 days. It has cost over 25,000 lives. Over 60,000 people have been injured, and 80% of the population have been displaced. And Netanyahu said no. In fact, he told Joe Biden that he essentially will not stop until he has control of the land from the river to the sea, which So if you're still on that whole, but what about the hostages? What about Hamas train? Get off. They don't care about the hostages. They are pawns in the game of genocide. They are justifications for violence, and their lives, quite frankly, mean nothing to the Israeli government. If all of the violence and the horror and the starvation and the loss of life hasn't made you angry, maybe that little fact will. When Barbie first came out, a lot of y'all talked y'all's talk about that little monologue, that little feminist 101 speech, and how it wasn't radical enough and how it didn't push the boundaries enough. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. You're right. It was a really basic, rudimentary speech. But what I am also saying is that Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig both got snubbed for Barbie at the Oscars. And it's not that they got snubbed, it's that Ryan Gosling got a nom for Ken. I mean, between our obsession with Ken and the I Am Kenough hoodies, Ryan Gosling's Oscar nom, and I'm Just Ken's Critics' Choice Award win and Grammy nom, Ken is getting way more attention and praise than any of the women in Barbie, thus reinforcing the plot of Barbie. What it looks like is that while many of us who are well-versed in feminism did not need that basic speech, clearly some people did, and clearly some people still do. My point is, just because a lot of us are taking Feminism 756, a lot of people did not take Feminism 101, and in fact, very much do need it. Let me preface this by saying I don't think that Barbie is more important than Palestine. We obviously need to spend more energy talking about the genocide and less energy talking about movies. I'm talking about how important it is that everybody can understand the basics of something as we go on to have the necessary conversations about the more pressing and also more complicated issues going on in the world. Thank you. When I was an undergrad, I minored in women's and gender studies, but almost entirely on accident. Like, I just took a bunch of classes that sounded interesting, and by the time I was a senior, I found out I was one class away from the minor, and I was like, okay. That one class was like Feminism 300, but to take it, I had to take Feminism 101, which I had skipped, and I was like, okay. At first, I was like, chill class, easy A. But by the end of that first day, I learned they meant like basics, like gender versus sex, what is feminism by definition basics. And I wanted out. So I got out. Initially, I wondered why this class was even offered. It all seemed so common sense to me. But keep in mind, at that point, I was a senior who studied feminism abroad and gender in babies at this point. So I knew a lot. But as I sat in that class waiting to transfer out, I learned that my classmates didn't. They had questions, good questions. They got things wrong. I mean, they were learning this rudimentary basic stuff. And that's when I learned that just because I don't need it, it doesn't mean it's unneeded. And just because the world needs more complex conversation, it doesn't negate the need for basic ones either. And that's how I feel about that basic speech in Barbie. I don't need it. Many of us don't need it. We are well-versed in feminism, and we crave something more complex because that is what the world needs. That's not where a lot of the world or the country is, as we can see not only in award season, but in our own fascinations with Ken and yet our disdain for that speech. And I know you're going to say, we have bigger fish to fry than Barbie movies and Oscar nominations. There's a genocide. And you're right, but these things are connected. Walk with me. The crisis in Gaza demands the attention of every feminist in the world. Unborn babies are being cut out of their deceased mothers' wombs. The miscarriage rate is up 300%, and people are getting sick and dying from dirty menstrual products. You're right, Barbie is not our biggest topic. But, for example, in order to successfully address the menstrual crisis in Gaza, you first have to understand period poverty and the importance of clean and safe menstrual products. And to do that, you have to understand menstrual health and periods, which means you have to understand periods and the stigma that comes with them, which is a 101 conversation. And if we don't do that and lay that foundation, then when we talk about the menstruation crisis in Gaza, people's response will be, well, why don't they just rip the fabric off of tents? Because they don't understand. My 101 classmates likely would have struggled in my 300 level course because they needed the basics. And that class is important even though I needed to skip it. The same way that those foundational conversations are still important even though you don't need them. And honestly, if we can correctly critique the Barbie speech for its oversimplifications, but then turn our head 6 degrees and get angry that some people are upset that the misogynistic antagonist of the movie is getting more praise than any of the themes of feminism in the movie, maybe we need a refresher course too. Okay, is Gen Z really aging faster than millennials? Is Justin Bieber actually still in love with Selena Gomez, and is that why her and Hailey Bieber are constantly feuding? Who is the baddest in the rap game? Nicki Minaj or someone 5, 10, 15 years her junior? And if a woman doesn't pay at least half on the first date, what does she actually bring to the table besides punani? Those are the talks we should be tired of. But y'all don't get to be tired of talking about or hearing about genocide. And every single time I see one of those little tweets or one of those little comments, I'm muting Palestine, I'm muting Gaza, I don't want to talk about it anymore, I'm over it. I'm baffled, I'm flabbergasted, because in my head, there's no way that you positioned yourself in such a privileged place to feel like you can just be tired of the erasure of a population of people. There's no way. Because for every, I just don't want to hear about it anymore, y'all are quick to update us on the latest Taylor Swift discourse. Meanwhile, I'm sure that Bisan is tired of waking up every single morning displaced from her home, having to record the dehumanization of herself and her people. I'm sure that Plestia and Mutaz and all of the Palestinians who have been evacuated are tired of being away from their land and would like to go home now. And I'm sure that the Palestinians around the world are tired of waiting by the phone with bated breath, hoping that they hear news that their loved ones and relatives have survived the night. The same way that I'm sure that that young girl who got her leg amputated on her father's dining room table without anesthesia, and the other 10 Palestinian children a day that lose a limb, are tired of looking at their body parts, wondering where the rest of it is and hoping they could get it back. I'm sure they're tired too. So every time I hear someone go, I have boycott fatigue, like I'm just so over it. I just want my Starbies. I scratch my head. I clean out my ears, because there's no way that you've privileged yourself and your comfort in a situation this dire. Because you don't get to be tired enough to quit. Not when you are sitting in the comfort of your home that is likely heated in the middle of winter, making commentary on your phone that has both internet and electricity. You don't get to turn your back on people who need us. And if we're going to dead a conversation, let it be, is Ariana Grande a homewrecker or a victim? Or are men too masculine to drink cocktails? Let it be one of those stupid ancient conversations. It doesn't get to be this. We don't get to be tired. We're better than that. Let me make this clear before this gets any more misconstrued. I don't fundamentally care about those 2 women's Oscar nominations. They will likely get them at another time, and also I don't respect the Oscars. My point has been and will always be that we do need that entry-level feminism that was critiqued so heavily in Barbie, because we see it play out in our day-to-day lives on a regular basis. The Oscars and award season as a collective being an example, not because of these 2 snubs, but because Ken is clearing award season in a way that has even Ryan Gosling upset and confused. That's my point, is that we do need entry-level feminism. It is not about those white women, and it's not about that movie about that little white doll. It's about the fact that some of you have decided we don't need feminism 101. Meanwhile, I'm explaining to children why you can't rip the fabric off of tents to make healthy menstrual products. Now, I could go on to talk about my absolute refusal to lump in the accomplishments of women and diminish them by making them a part of a bigger conversation about our response to Ken. I think they're worth more than that, but that's not really where I'm headed. I could talk about the fact that y'all are blaming Greta, the director, for the fact that you all became enamored with, in a movie about feminism, a singing misogynist in a fur coat, but that's not really where I'm headed either. No, this is your reminder that I have a full-time job outside of TikTok and a part-time job, and some really big personal news that, while I'm excited to share with you this weekend, is exhausting. I am not a content creating machine. I am a person, which means that if you see one post from me and then you're like, I'd like to get your thoughts and feelings on something else, and I say, I'll get to it, I will get to it when I get to it, because I have bills to pay that you don't pay. Okay, but you didn't talk about this, you didn't talk about that. Babe, I made one post because that is all I had time for, and I said I will get to it when I get to it. And y'all have to respect the fact that we are people too. More than anything, I am an educator, and for the last 100 days, I've been trying to do my part to educate about Palestine. It's all over my page if you click on more than the one Barbie video. But lately, it has bled over into my real life too, as I'm also an educator, and my students and I have been talking about Palestine in great detail. That is where my focus has been. That is where my heart has been, not on this one video that took me a few minutes to make. I am not a dog that says how high when you say jump. If I say I'm going to get to something, I'm going to get to it unless I forget, because again, multifaceted human being with a lot of things going on, including the jobs that pay my bills. And honestly, I don't care if I am or ever was your favorite content creator, because that means nothing to me if you can't recognize my complexities and my humanity as a person. So please, watch y'all's tone when you are talking to me. Let's talk about the difference between entry-level feminism, white feminism, and feminism where white people just happen to be present. Entry level feminism, Feminism 101, The Basics, talks about just that. The basics of feminism as an independent singular entity. Feminism is the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes per se. And I mean the basics, like gender versus sex, why women are expected to be caretakers, the perception of women as demure and submissive and how that's impacted our lives. Broad strokes applicable to many, many people. To understand intersectionality, you also have to have some base level understanding of other types of marginalization, like racism and classism, which, while important and key to feminism and to women, is a separate discourse. Now, if we center women of color that specifically in that monologue, the way I think a lot of us want to, we have to be very careful, because what you're doing is opening up another discourse that needs to be properly unpacked or undressed. Too much of it and you've created a trauma movie, too little of it and you're just performing for the sake of performing. It's tough. And because women of color are still women, entry-level feminism does touch on their experiences, just not in detail, which is why we shouldn't spend a lot of time in entry-level feminism, but it is useful as foundational work. White feminism is feminism that centers the white experience, specifically the experiences of white, usually middle to upper class women. It's wearing handmaids' costumes to reproductive rights protests because they've never been in that situation before, while a lot of black and brown women have said, okay, but we have, please take that off. It's not that basic feminism is white feminism. In fact, basic feminism does touch on most people, but it's where white women's interests stop, so it's what they talk about the most, and the two have this correlation that needs to be separated. And feminism where white people are present is just that. It's feminism where there are white people, and just because they don't agree with you doesn't inherently make it white feminism. So again, entry-level feminism and white feminism are separate. They only look the same because white women's interest in feminism stops at the basics, but it doesn't mean the basics are inherently white feminism. I hope to someone this might be helpful. I'm going to say this with all respect and gentleness because I think the people asking who's the Barbie speech actually for aren't asking out of malice. But the answer is children. And I don't mean little kids like My Little Pony and Bluey aged. I'm talking about that age range that we all tend to forget exists, where tweens and teenagers hang out, about 10-ish to about 15. That's who the Barbie speech is for, not grown women with master's degrees and fully developed frontal lobes. Because any movie about a doll that isn't a horror movie isn't 100% marketed towards grown women that don't play with dolls anymore. Like any movie about a toy is going to pull in people who play with or have recently played with said toy. And in all honesty, I think this discourse we're having around the value of entry-level feminism, and then we're going to end this discourse because we have bigger fish to fry, is reflective of the fact that we don't really acknowledge or respect the fact that kids, teens, and tweens have a space in this world. Like ignoring the fact that there's really no place for kids to go anymore and be young. Like they have nowhere they can hang out after school. We are all over their social media platforms. And at this point, we think that even their movies are targeted exclusively towards us. But putting that fact aside, if we don't tell them what feminism is and what that looks like and what that means, they're not going to learn it until they're women and something has already happened to them. Like putting aside the fact that men might benefit from entry-level feminism and that entry-level feminism might be validating or supporting to the adult women who grew up without it, as many did, but there is an entire population of people who are in all sincerity just getting started. And we consistently overlook them because we are no longer those people. But we were kids too once. And someone had to tell us how to be the same way someone has to tell them how to be. And if they got it from the Barbie movie, that's okay.
I hate those people that are like, oh my God, why do y'all make everything about sexism? Why do y'all make everything about racism? Why do y'all make everything about colorism? Because it is. It is. I'm sorry. I hate to wake you up, but it's time, baby. It's time. Come on.
I think one thing we should never lose sight of as a society is just how much One Direction's cover of Teenage Dirtbag changed the culture. I know it changed the culture for me personally, because when I was in middle school, One Direction was at peak popularity. It was 1D mania. You couldn't escape it. But I was going through my like pop punk Warped Tour emo phase. I was very much like a 13-year-old girl saying stuff like, other girls like Niall, but me, I like Tom DeLonge. Very that. And so when I heard that One Direction was covering Teenage Dirtbag, I was like, oh, this ought to be good. 1D covering a pop punk classic. And I was so ready to clown on it. I was so ready to hate. And then I heard Harry come in with her name is Noelle. Noelle, just a little up note. I went, wait, could these boys be cooking? And it's the bridge that sealed the deal for me. Zayn's Run. Dirtbag! I butchered it, but he sings it like an angel. And I had to give it to them. They earned my begrudging teenage respect, which is no small feat. I was like, okay, you lads did well. I wish you all the best in your career.
You know how I know this generation sucks at picking men? Because why are y'all Team Cole over Team Alex? You're picking the guy who didn't even want to say hi to a girl who just lost her entire family in a car crash, who put bleach in her shampoo and made a bet with her brother about it, tried to kiss her when she was drunk, like very drunk, got extremely drunk at his mother's award ceremony and ruined the whole thing, and then told the girl he supposedly loves that he wishes she never came here. Oh, and that's not the fact that he kissed his brother's girlfriend and continuously tried to get at her knowing they were dating, would treat women awful, and his girlfriend at the time slept with her best friend continuously and treated her horrible. Also told his little sister he was going to be at her football game and instead was hooking up with the girl. Oh no, but Alex is moving too fast. They've been dating for 6 months, and apparently saying I love you in 6 months is too fast. Oh, he's too clingy. Oh, God forbid he cares. Like, what? Oh my God, he's so jealous of Cole. Do you all see how people treat him? Like, he took his first girlfriend. What makes you think he's not going to be, like, nervous about this second time? Like, hello? Oh my God, y'all are... Oh! Okay, but the only actual thing broken about Cole is his damn leg. Like, that man wants mommy or daddy issues so bad when he has this loving family and could actually have a life, but he's so sad because he can't play football. Girl, it happened his sophomore year too. It's not even like, oh my gosh, his senior year, his junior year, he got a good offer. Girl, no. It happened his sophomore year. Like, I don't care.
In case you missed it, the ICJ has ruled that some of the evidence South Africa brought against Israel on claims of genocide are plausible. That's good news. Now that we all agree that the sky is blue, we can demand a ceasefire, right? Quite the opposite, actually, which is very bizarre because they sat there and read genocidal statements from Israeli government officials. They also talked about all the different things that Palestinians are going through, from starvation to being killed to being displaced, and then said, carry on killing and bombing, just tone it down, make sure you provide aid, and give us a report in a month to make sure that there are no genocidal things happening. They also ordered Israel to punish anyone who incites genocide, which is the biggest joke of the century because we know that's not going to happen. And currently right now, Palestinians in Khan Yunis are trying to evacuate for the 100th time. After watching the ruling, I got on Instagram and I was scrolling on Saleh's stories and I saw this photo and it completely broke my heart. All I could think was, how many times in this man's life has he been through this? And then I see this little boy and all I could think was, how many times is he gonna have to go through it? I don't know what I expected today, but what a disappointment.
Women and girls in Gaza are now using tent scraps as period products. These women and these girls are using tent scraps as period products. Do you understand how fucking dehumanizing that is? Not only do they not have access to clean water, not only do they have access to a clean bathroom, not only do they not have proper living quarters, they do not have access to period products, and they have to resort to using tent scraps. If you experience a period, you have had a moment, some point in your life, where you have had nothing. Haven't had pads, haven't had tampons, and in that moment, I know for a fact you have felt sheer panic. And in that moment, on top of the panic, you've probably felt very icky about yourself. You've probably felt embarrassed and very awkward. You also probably felt very small. I cannot start to imagine what these women are feeling having to use fucking tent scraps. More people need to be angry about this because this is fucking ridiculous.
I'm not a feminist. I would watch this video and I wouldn't be offended.
You know, it was less than 50 years ago that women were allowed to get their own credit card. Before this, they had to have their father or their husband sign off on everything they bought, even if they were earning more than their husband. It wasn't until 1920 that in the US, white women could vote. Black women, however, weren't able to vote freely until 1965. In the UK, it wasn't until 1928 that women got equal voting rights. Cambridge University did not grant degrees to women until 1948. In 1920, women were allowed to attend Oxford University, but it wasn't until 1957 that the quotas restricting the number of women undergraduates were lifted. It wasn't until 1960 in the US that women had readily available contraception, and it was as late as 1967 here in the UK. Yale and Princeton didn't accept female students until 1969. Harvard didn't accept female students until 1977. That is within our parents' lifetimes. The two acts that meant women could get their own credit cards in the US and the UK came in 1974 and 1975. Abortions were legalised in the UK in 1967 on certain grounds, but women in the US had to wait until 1973 for the Roe versus Wade case. This was then overturned in 2022. 2 years ago, millions of women lost the right to abortion. These things have all come into effect in the last 100 years. That is extremely recent history, and none of them would have happened without the feminist movements like the suffragettes. So to say, I'm not a feminist, I let my boyfriend pay for dinner, is not only proving that you know nothing about what the feminist movement was, it's also tarnishing the memories of all of the women who fought for you to have the choice to pay for dinner or not.
I thought that we were all against war. I'm not lying, this is such a naive thing for me to think, but I thought that all of us hated war. Especially since a lot of our parents and grandparents fought in wars and may now experience disabilities or may have lost their lives or, whatever it may be. I thought all of us hated that shit. But I guess not. And first of all, I want to say that what's going on right now in Gaza is not a war. It's a genocide. There is one side that is far more powerful than the other side, and the less powerful side has no standing chance. The only way for the Palestinian people now to survive is a ceasefire. So again, me being a naive little bitch, thinking that everybody would be in support of a ceasefire, but no. But with that being said, I have a question for the people that don't support a ceasefire. Why? Do you actually think that murdering more Palestinians is going to keep you safe and is going to protect your liberties? Because that is the same fucking thing that our government, that the United States government told us when we got ourselves involved in the Middle East, that we were fighting against terrorism and that they were protecting our liberties. Oh, right. Yeah, murdering millions of innocent Middle Easterners is definitely gonna keep me in America safe. It's bullshit. That is imperialism. So for those that do consider themselves to be Zionists, especially Jewish Zionists, how can you support an ideology, again, that it has the same backbone as the ideology that allowed the Holocaust to take place? Jews were seen as a threat in Europe by the Nazi regime, and they were able to murder 6 million plus of us. We lost a very, very large majority of our demographic, okay? And then Israel was created for the protection and self-determination of the Jewish people, which is bullshit, in my opinion. And now, this country that is supposed to protect us Jewish people after we were genocided is now genociding another population of people. And they're using the same fucking propaganda and the same verbiage, calling Palestinian children children of darkness. Are you fucking with me? That's not real. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I put my morals before anything, above anything. They are the backbone of who we are as people. They are the pillars that keep us standing. So how, actually, it's just that the people that don't support a ceasefire just don't have the same morals. Because they clearly actually think that murdering innocent people will maintain their freedoms and keep them safe. It's crazy. But I just wanted to make a video talking about this because I want so badly for more Jewish people that fall under the Zionist category to realize what it is that they are supporting. So, I also know I'm going to get a lot of comments talking about the hostages. Hamas just said that they would free them in return for a ceasefire, and Netanyahu said no. So, what are your thoughts on that? Genuinely, what are your thoughts on that? Are you gonna, call out the hypocrisy of the Israeli government now? And Netanyahu? Because that's what you should be doing. And it's not anti-Semitic. And also, if you're going to talk about the hostages, let's talk about the thousands of Palestinians that are being held hostage in Israeli prisons. Okay.